was the peak of the Civil War in Lebanon. Your average child under the age of 7, their memories are outside, playing, learning, having fun with other friends. For me, most of the memories that stick out from that point in my life were hiding, coming in and out of shelter for safety reasons. Do you want to be in the driver's seat of your own life or in the passenger seat? Everyone wants to be in the driver's seat, but oftentimes the reality is that we're not, because we're chasing things. We live life in autopilot. We spend time scrolling on social media, and we take decisions in a way that's not really aligned with who we are, especially in today's world. One of the key metrics of success in life is, in business, people talk about return on investment or ROI. Personally, for me, it's return on time. How do I maximize the most return on my time? Time is a currency, and it's something that we're all given coming into this world. We all have the same amount of time in a day. And so being conscious of how we spend that and what is the value of that hour for us is really important.
This is the Human Future Podcast, where we explore the intersection of technology and spirituality with some of the world's brightest minds. Together, we paint a vision of the desirable future and discuss the actionable steps to make that vision a reality. And now, without further ado, let's begin. Today's guest is JP Aramouni, a recognized entrepreneur with a fascinating journey. Born in Lebanon during the Civil War, JP moved to the United States and built an impressive career in tech and consulting. He played a crucial role in Uber's early international growth and has founded several impactful companies, including Play, which helps remote workers combat loneliness and burnout. During our conversation, we explore JP's inspiring story, his thoughts on technology and well-being, and how he turned personal challenges into powerful lessons. Get ready to learn and be inspired by JP's big ideas. Let's get started. Welcome. Thank you for coming on. This experiment, I always tell people that this is still an experiment that I'm running. So I'd love for you to start off by sharing with us a little bit about your story. Who are you and what brought you here? Not just here into this studio, but what brought you to the type of work that you're doing now as a culmination of all of your life efforts, basically.
Great. Thanks for having me, Kirill.
Of course, man.
I'm Jean-Pierre. I go by JP. What brought me here? That's always an interesting question to answer. I think life is more easily understood in hindsight. So when I look back and look at all the inflection points in my life and transformational experiences and events, it's easy to connect the dots. However, in the time, my perception of these events and experiences may have been very different. Some were challenging, some were perceived as obstacles, some were celebrations. But in hindsight, every single experience and event in my life had a purpose. And I feel privileged to be at a point in my life where I can look back and connect those dots in a beautiful and meaningful way. And so where I am today, I feel like I'm truly at a point in my life where I have control of my time and as a result, my freedom, both in how I spend my time, how I spend my professional and personal time, and more importantly, like the things that I'm focusing on building and having a bigger impact on. So for me today, and for the last couple of years, I've been building and investing what I call at the intersection of three things: tech, the real world, what we're grounded in, and well-being, both personal well-being and planetary well-being.
Beautiful. Yeah. So maybe let's unpack a little bit about your story, your background. I mean, you did consulting for a little while, right? You were in corporate consulting world. Maybe share a little bit about that story,
Sure.
that journey. Yeah.
Started off my career in consulting,
Yeah.
strategy and management consulting. Did that for the first 6 years of my career. So I would say most of my 20s, I was the suit and tie guy. I learned a lot, actually. I'm super grateful for that time in my life. It gave me a mindset that has allowed me to kind of break down and analyze different problems and experiences and analyze them in a way to get to a solution. I mean, that's what consultants do. They call them business doctors. It's funny. So I think having had that experience in the beginning of my career really set me up to have this approach to everything in life, both personally and professionally. So yes, kicked off my career in consulting, Did that for 6 years, lived out of a suitcase most of the time, traveling across the world. It was fun. It was exhausting at the same time, but it was this adrenaline that kept you going, and working with people who are similar and traveling the world with them and working on exciting projects across different sectors. I was just in this expansive mindset from a professional perspective where I felt, in your 20s, you have this view and courage that you can do anything in life and change the world. And that's kind of what I felt, having had these opportunities to work on incredible projects.
Yeah. And you briefly, behind the camera, mentioned to me, so about 8 years ago, you had would you consider it like a breaking point or a shift in the way you do things? Share a little bit about that.
Yeah. In hindsight, I call it burnout. I didn't know what to call it at the time. It was just a challenging time in my life and career. So after consulting, went on to business school, and from there on, I shifted to focus on tech, a career in tech as an operator. Joined Uber after business school when I was on the growth team. This was a team that they were dropping in different markets to launch the business, and it was similar to consulting in terms of lifestyle and intensity. But at the same time, focused more on hands-on execution, operations, getting things done rather than strategy and visioning. And it gave me an entirely different skill set. And again, continued living out of a suitcase, traveling the world, living in different markets, getting what I recall being an incredible experience. And so for the next 7 years of my career, I was in tech in similar roles across different companies, and living in different markets, mostly emerging markets across the world. And I remember there was a point in 2017, I was living and working in Hong Kong, and it was a realization for me where I realized that on paper, I was everything you described to be successful, right? I had followed the playbook, went to the schools, worked for the brands, whatever. However, deep down, I felt like there was something missing, and that feeling really confused me, because I'm like, I went by the book, I followed the rules, I feel successful on paper, I'm considered successful. However, I don't feel like it's enough, and what is it that I'm missing? And so when I realized that I wasn't truly fulfilled in that moment, despite the fact that I was successful on paper, it put me down this rabbit hole of trying to answer that question and why I was in that state. And so it became really hard for me to be fully engaged on the job. And I remember asking for time off and took a sabbatical for a month. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I wanted to disconnect and find a way to answer that question. And so prior to that period, I didn't really have any kind of mindfulness practice in my life. I pretty much lived life in autopilot, right? I went from one thing to the next, chased incredible opportunities, lived across many countries. And I got to a point where I realized that there has to be more to life than, just going from one thing to the next. And so, I didn't have a mindfulness practice. I was telling my friends and people in my circle that I wanted to go on a retreat. The idea of going on a retreat for me was just it would help me refresh, but I didn't know what that really meant. And many of my friends in my circle would ask me if I'm going on a silent retreat. I really had no idea what that was. And my immediate reaction was, of course not, because at the time it was hard for me to spend time alone, in silence specifically. So the more I responded no to that question, the more it actually forced me to look into that and understand what a silent retreat was. And I was living in Hong Kong in Asia at the time, ended up finding one, was recommended by a friend in Bali. And I just signed up for it, and within a week, I was there. It was a secluded rice field in the middle of the island. Incredible. You can go in for minimum couple of days, stay up to a month. It wasn't Vipassana, so not super strict, but for beginners or someone who didn't have a mindfulness practice at all, it was a great way to start. And so I spent 10 days in that silent retreat. And my intention was just to really answer that question, what will make me feel more fulfilled and more happy in life. And on that retreat, I brought a book with me that probably unlocked, the path that I'm on today. And it's a book that I recommend to all my friends, colleagues, family, whoever is at that crossroad in their life. And it's a book called Designing Your Life. It's by Bill Burnett. He's the director of the design school at Stanford. And he takes human-centric design principles and applies them to life and career planning. And so, in a way, it actually gives us an opportunity to rewrite the book and go back to a blank slate and ask ourselves, one, what do we value? What are our core values deep down within us? Get to know ourselves at that level. And I think we rarely get a chance to do that in life, right? Through the education system, the career network, the system around that. It's just like, one thing to the next. We rarely get a chance to turn around and go inward and ask ourselves what we really want. Like, what does success mean to us, if nothing else mattered? And so that book, for me, was an incredible guide to help answer that question. So, at the end of every chapter, there's a few exercises and allows you to really identify your core values. And from that starting point, craft a life and a career that's fully in alignment with who you are internally. And so for me, I look at that period of my life, and it was a period of course correction, I would say, where up until that point, I lived life in autopilot, and it was incredible. It brought me success at an early age, but it was a definition of success that I chased, that was imposed by society, by my circles, by my network, not one that I defined personally. And I think it's really important for people to define what success means to them personally. And so for me, I got to that point where for the first time I had a chance to do that and do it from a place of alignment, from a place of integrity, from a place that's truly connected to the core values that I really believed in, that were my guiding principles for life. And so the outcome of that exercise, that book, is actually 3 different, what they call adventure blueprints for the life and career that you would design if it were up to you, that's fully in alignment with your core values that are your life guiding principles. And so I came out with 3 different versions, and this was 7 years ago, a little more now actually. And oftentimes when I pause to reflect and look back at that time, at least one of those is actually, planted the seed for the life that I carried for the following 7, 8 years until the point to where I am today. And so I think it was a really important point in my life. And so if I look back at, what I called burnout in hindsight, it was actually an opportunity for me to revisit that question and do that exercise of what is important for me, what does success mean to me, and how do I course correct the path that I'm on to work towards it.
So what were those guiding principles that you discovered?
Yeah, for me, I think deep down, impact has been a huge theme in my life. The ability to leave the world in a better place than it was when I came into it. And I've done that in different ways in my career. It was something that I was truly passionate about growing up. I was born in a war zone. My family was raised in Lebanon, and I spent the first 7 years of my life during the peak of the Civil War there. And it's something that I never really unpacked, but it's actually a huge part of my life that shaped me and wired my mind in ways that I was not aware of until later on in my life. And so I knew I wanted to be able to work on impact and something that gives back to countries, to people, in a way that wasn't there when I came into this world. And so that's been a recurring theme in my life. And I think having had the chance to revisit and reconnect with myself and my core during that silent retreat was a reminder of that theme and allowed me to define principles and values around that, whether around impact, integrity, alignment, and balance. And so those principles, I look at them as filters for key decisions that I take in my professional and personal life. And so the ability to, use them to guide me to decisions that ultimately become more fulfilling for me going forward.
Yeah, so I wanted to, I'm putting myself in the shoes of someone who might be at the point where you were, let's say 10 years ago, where they are maybe chasing the success that's been defined for them, and they have a carrot in front of them that they're chasing, and then they're starting to recognize that something is off, something might be. And in fact, I believe that in general, at least in the Western world, people are starting to recognize that sooner than previous generations or even 10 years ago. There's a shift that's happening, like a consciousness shift that people are recognizing, oh, that I'm not on my path.
Right.
And so I'm putting myself in those shoes, and also kind of looking at this whole process. How do we speed it up? How can we contribute to having more people finding out their true path? What can we do? Maybe advice or some kind of effort that we can do to help more people to sooner recognize that they're chasing the wrong carrot, or they're something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the short answer to that is to slow down, right? Where we live in a world where we have access to so much, especially with the internet, that we can be doing multiple things at once. And there's often that, fear of missing out. You see things happening across the other side and you want to engage in them, yet you're engaged in multiple things on this side. It's people are constantly stretched and overwhelmed and are being pulled in different directions, rather than them choosing where to go. And so, I think slowing down for me is really important. And that's kind of what I did during that time in my life when I reached that breaking point, is to really take some time and, we chase things outwardly. What if we make a U-turn and go inward, right? And oftentimes, I mean, that for me, that kind of work, what we call spiritual work, conscious work, self-actualization, personal development, many names for it, that work for me has been a true gift, because it's allowed me to get to know myself in my core and take decisions from that place, key decisions for my life. I think many people, the idea of doing that work is scary, but guiding people and specifically, providing mentorship on how to do that and guiding them throughout that process is really important. And that's kind of the reasons why I built Play, my last venture, is to really democratize access to self-actualization. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, self-actualization is actually at the tip of that pyramid. And we have to address different needs throughout life to get to that point. However, if you look at it, self-actualization should be a basic human right. The reality today is that it's not. You have to be at some comfort level to be able to do that kind of work. It's truly privilege to be able to do that work. You need the time, sometimes the money, the headspace, and in the times that we live in today, like those are not always there for everyone. And so building a platform that helps people accelerate that path or democratize the path to self-actualization is really important for me, because I feel like the sooner we can unlock that for people in life, the more fulfilled and more balanced they'll feel throughout their life. And that's something that people should experience as early on as possible in their life.
I wanted to comment on the slowing down idea that you've shared. Once I had this vision, it was a very sensory experience when I understood this whole concept of when you are moving so basically the speed of navigating life influences the angle at which you're looking. So the faster you go, it's like you're on the highway. The faster you go, the more narrow. When you're on a motorcycle, all you look at is like a very narrow little beam right in front of you, because you can't be looking around too much. You have to be and so the slower you go, the wider. So now you can look around. And whenever people pursuing a goal, so they only see, and then they're moving really fast towards it. They can't be noticing other. So they can't reassess, am I on the right track? Just because all they see is this little carrot in front of them.
Right.
And then when you do making a full stop, you have an opportunity to, hopefully not on the highway, but in general, if you have a full stop, then you can look 360, and then you can raise your head and say, oh, where am I actually, is this the right track? Maybe there's something over there that's a lot more attractive for me, that's pulling me in, something like that.
Right. No, spot on. I think for me, the way I define it very similarly is, do you want to be in the driver's seat of your own life or in the passenger seat? Mm-hmm. Right? For sure, everyone wants to be in the driver's seat, but oftentimes the reality is that we're not, right? Because we're chasing things. We live life in autopilot. We spend time scrolling on social media, and we take decisions in a way that's not really aligned with who we are, and especially in today's world. And so the analogy I use is like, when you're getting to know a city, what's more effective? Getting to know the city walking, where you have a chance to actually look around and be mindful in what's around you, like this local cafe, these people, what they're talking about, whatever it is, versus driving through a city and not even have the opportunity to notice all the detail. And so, again, back to your point about slowing down, like in today's life, it's actually really challenging to slow down.
Yeah.
It's really challenging, but there's different ways to do it. And I think we've gotten to a point where slowing down doesn't mean that you are going to take longer to get to your destination. We should look at these breaks as refuel stations, right? Because we know now from burnout, from various issues, whether it's in mental health or elsewhere, that it's unsustainable to keep going at that pace, especially life in autopilot. And so how do you build a more sustainable, more balanced and more fulfilling approach to life? You take conscious breaks to refuel. And refueling means different things for different people. Just like cars, like some cars take diesel, some cars take like premium fuel, some cars take regular fuel. Like, what is your fuel in life, right? Identify that fuel and take conscious breaks in between your sprints to actually stop and refuel, right? I think that for me, in the past 7 to 8 years, I've been on this path, has proven to be effective, versus in the prior life that I had where I thought I had unlimited fuel and I could keep going until I realized that wasn't the case, right? When you're in control of how much fuel you have left and when you need to stop to refuel, you're in the driver's seat of life.
Yeah, I think the related idea to that is a common mindset that people, or popular mindset that people might have, is grinding through challenge, that they're just grinding to success. Like they're going to do anything possible, just exert as much effort into something to get through a challenge.
Yeah.
So the whole notion of grinding assumes that there's a rock to grind, that the medium through which you navigate life is this dense rock and you have to grind it through. I think there's some moments in life where that might be the case, where that might be still the most optimal way, is to grind through a little bit of rock over here, because to go around is a lot further. But I think in other cases, more often, there's a shorter or like much easier path to go through the cracks or around the rock. You don't have to get through it like that as just a brute force, basically.
Yeah. No, I like that, and I think we have to realize that many things in life are actually a marathon and not a sprint. So you have to pace yourself, right? We have limited resources, limited energy internally, right? How do we want to spend that, right? How do we want to spend that time to get the most return on our own time? For me, like one of the key metrics of success in life is, in business, people talk about return on investment or ROI. Personally, for me, it's return on time. I call it ROT, right? Like, how do I maximize the most return on my time? Our time is our most valuable currency, right? So how do we plan our time and the effort that we exert and the energy that we put through in a way that maximizes the value of that return on our own personal time?
Yeah, it's interesting because then if you measure the whole economy based on how much time it got, let's say traffic is such a waste of time, right? It's such a But then, are you considering every minute of everyone's life is equal, or is it different, right? Because everyone contributes in a different way to society. Like, well,
Yeah.
is it a personal thing, or like, how do you compare the 1 minute of one person? And
It's a really interesting question. And I actually read another incredible book on this topic specifically. It's called How to Live on 24 Hours a Day. It's a short book, but apparently, the author talks about how there's so many indifferences in the world, social, economic. The one thing that we all have in common is 24 hours a day. So how we choose to spend those 24 hours will differentiate between, someone who's successful and someone who's not, based on your own definition of success. So we have to understand that time is a currency also. It's something that we're all given coming into this world. Again, there's other factors like resources, people we have access to, but we all have the same amount of time in a day. So being conscious of how we spend that and what is the value of that hour for us is really important.
For sure, yeah. So you mentioned about just kind of shifting gears a little bit. You mentioned about the childhood and first 7 years you lived in Lebanon, where there was unrest in the country. What was that like? Do you remember that much of it?
Honestly, like the first 7 years of my life were in and out of shelter. It was the peak of the Civil War in Lebanon. Your average child under the age of 7, their memories are outside, playing, learning, having fun with other friends, with kids their age. For me, most of the memories that stick out from that point in my life were hiding, coming in and out of shelter for safety reasons. And I never thought too much into it until, the last couple years where, with the help of different medicines and psychedelics, I was able to unpack what all that meant for me throughout my life, professionally and personally. And I think, now that I'm able to connect the dots in hindsight, I'm grateful for what I'd gone through because it got me to where I am today. However, living those first 7 years of your life, which are the most formative years of your life, in that kind of environment, where you have to seek safety for other reasons, you have to hide, you have to suppress your expression, the way you play, the way you express yourself as a child. Those are not things to overlook. Right. And so I look at that and like as an immigrant moving to the US at the age of 7, not speaking English at the time, and trying to blend in, there's a lot of things, a lot of baggage that I brought with me at the age of 7. Right. And so the way I learned how to address that as a child, the insecurities that came with that, the, issues that I was going through mentally, I didn't know how to process. The way I addressed those was to cover them and to overlook them and to continue pushing through that rock, like you mentioned. That was the way, the path to success for me, was to, as quickly as possible, overlook this and try to get to a point that's very different. And so for me in school, growing up, I was always the overachiever, the straight A student. At work, I became the workaholic, right? That's how that translated. And in hindsight, again, it brought me success at a young age, but there were different ways to cover up for some things that I didn't take the time to really think through and address. And so later on in life, when I actually had no choice but to go inward, when I hit burnout 8 years ago, it was actually an opportunity to go in and unpack all of this and connect the dots and understand how these challenges or events at that point in my life impacted who I am today and the decisions that I took that got me here. And so for me, growing up those first 7 years of my life in an environment where I had to seek safety, the way I interpret that time in my life now is it created this mindset that operates out of fear, right? Where we're seeking shelter and safety. And that's something that I had to consistently look for in life, even beyond the point of the war where I had safety, just because my mind was wired that way. Yeah. And so how did I seek safety in academic setting in a professional setting, it was in the ways I described, by being an overachiever, a workaholic, and that's what allowed me to maintain control of my life and the situation around me. But what I learned is that, taking decisions from a place of fear is not always great. It's great to protect you. It's a mental mechanism to actually create a sense of safety, but it's not always the lens of how we should be looking at life. And for me, that unraveling of shifting from, okay, how do I go from looking at the situation from a place of fear to a place of love, more openness and more acceptance? And that for me has put me on a path where I'm taking more risks. I'm open to new perspectives, new ideas. And through that process, you go from, your life operating in the square, the boundaries that you've defined for yourself, to a much more expansive life, right? Where the boundaries are actually limitless. And I continue to surprise and impress myself with, how much growth is possible, how much expansion is possible beyond any kind of mental boundary. And that, for me, that process has been incredible because I feel like there's so much that you can extract out of life. And, that mindset shift for me has been a true gift, and one that I try to help others with where I can.
Mm-hmm. So that mindset shift, how did it externally change the way you make decisions? Are you as like a player overachiever, or sometimes you how did that change your behavior externally, would you say?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for me, let's look at stress, for example. Yeah. If we don't manage our nervous system, it manages us. And for me, if I look at my past self, in those situations of high stress or high anxiety, my mind goes into this fight or flight mode, right? I either want to put up a fight or I want to leave the situation. And that is basically responding from a place of fear. Yeah. If you take that same situation and, for me personally, apply what I've learned, that mindset shift of reframing that challenge, that specific situation, into not so much of a challenge, but an opportunity to expand, to learn and to grow, right? So what is this teaching me? Not, this is not happening to me, it's happening for me. And so what is the specific situation or event teaching me? What lesson can I extract from it? And if you apply that growth mindset to every single situation like that, I guarantee you will come out stronger.
Yeah, I have the same belief on anything that happens to me, especially something undesirable, what appears to be undesirable in the moment, is always asking myself, what is it here for me to learn? There's some kind of lesson. It's happening for a reason, and now it's just a matter of finding the reason.
Yeah.
And also, when dealing with other people, that completely removed any kind of judgment from me, because I know that everyone is doing their best at every moment in time, considering that we all have this baggage, trauma, things that are pulling us down and not preventing us from being a fully manifested version of ourselves. Besides that, we're trying to do our best with whatever resources, information that we have. Yeah. And when you see someone acting suboptimally, you just take it as, basically you assuming that there's something that you're not seeing potentially in them, that there's probably some, either it's your limited perception of the situation. I mean, it's basically either they're acting suboptimally or you acting suboptimally by not seeing. It's either, anyway, so it's just this perspective really helps to merge the gap between ideas, people, judgment. Like it removes all judgment in any situation.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's just realizing that everyone is on their own path.
Yes.
Right? Everyone is going through their own process, whether they realize it or not. Mm-hmm. And, once you've gone through that process yourself, you're able to have that perspective And I think reminding yourself constantly that's the case prevents a lot of arguments, situations that shouldn't happen. Creates more acceptance in the world, which is needed, especially now, more empathy. But yeah, I think it's a great way of looking at the world.
And you mentioned about working with plant medicine, different tools. Share what worked really well for you, some of the things maybe you would recommend to somebody else. Maybe not to do it, but to look into it or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, plant medicine for me is not something I was seeking. It kind of like fell in my lap and I considered it, and I was approaching everything with an open mind, and it was a beautiful experience and truly a gift for me. It accelerated my personal growth and development on many levels. But beyond psychedelics, there's different tools that help us maintain that practice, because going through that journey is what I call the easy thing. You drink the tea, you have the ceremony, whatever it is, that's the easy part. The hard part is actually the time that follows, which is the integration, right? It's like, what do you do with what you saw? What do you do with that shift in perspective? How do you translate that shift into actionable items in your life to actually enable real behavioral shift and changes across different areas of your life? And so for me, that's been even more important than the actual journey itself. And a tool that's helped me throughout this journey, and there's been several, but one, what's been my personal fuel, has been breathwork. And, it's a ancient technique, actually. James Nestor's book, Breath, actually goes into how ancient civilizations, from the Chinese to the Indians, use different methods of breathwork, of breathing, to actually achieve different objectives in life, and how the shape of our teeth and different things in the human body are directly impacted by the way we breathe. And so for me, breathwork has been an incredible tool that I've acknowledged that I carry with me, and every single person actually carries with them. The breath is probably the most undervalued tool that we carry with us as humans. One, we're not aware of how powerful it is, and two, we're never really taught on how to breathe correctly and how to really leverage that tool in the most effective way. A couple months ago, I completed a level 1 training in breathwork, just because I went down this rabbit hole of really trying to understand the science behind it, the different techniques, and how do I build a toolkit of this method that's been really effective for me and share that gift with other people. But there's different ways of breathing to achieve different objectives. And for me, I look at it as a tool to help disarm people when they're stressed and anxious and in that fight or flight mindset. So, the breath and different techniques of breathing can be used to help you de-stress and achieve a more calm state of mind. On the other side, there's also different techniques of breathing to help you energize. And so, say you didn't get good sleep previous night and you have a big day to come. How do you hack your mind? Maybe it can be a substitute for caffeine. How do you breathe in a way to actually help you energize? And so it's been really, truly fascinating for me to understand the different techniques of breathing, and that it's not something we have to pay for. It's something that it's a gift that we're all born with, right? We're never properly taught how to use it. And so that for me has been, I would say, one of the most effective tools in my integration journey over the last couple of years.
Any specific techniques that you could share with people? Or with me?
Several, but I mean...
Even you mentioned two distinct ones. One is more calming down. Yes, you can say, take a deep breath. Is that what it is? Or there's a more specific approach that you could maybe share? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you look at these two different objectives, one to help you calm down and de-stress, and the other one is to help you energize.
Right.
So to de-stress, there's something called box breathing.
Right.
It's, visualizing that you're breathing a box and inhaling for 4 seconds, holding it for 4 seconds, exhaling for 4 seconds, holding it for 4, and repeating that process 10 times.
It's
exactly.
Or wait, and then holding it for 4, then.
The way I visualize it is actually Like I tell people, pick your favorite cartoon character, assume they're climbing on a ladder, and then they're walking across for the same number of seconds, and then they're going down a slide for the same number of seconds, and they're walking back to the ladder, and then repeating that process 10 times. And if you really want to challenge yourself, you can do it up to like 9 or 10 seconds for every interval. And so doing that repeatedly is actually proven to help you calm your nervous system, and allows you to be in control of your nervous system instead of letting it control you and drive your decisions. And so that's been an incredible way. That's a tool that I use on a regular basis, actually on a daily basis, to help me calm down. And then one, to activate your breath is like the Wim Hof. It's a really famous method for breathing, but to really energize you, to warm you up. And oftentimes, like, people do that in preparation for an ice bath or a cold plunge. And so that's another way of like really leveraging the power of the breath to, heat up the engine and get it ready before you start whatever activity you're going to embark on.
Do you have a morning routine or practice that you do every day? Because you travel quite a bit, so it might be somewhat challenging to have a...
Yeah, you learn how to like build this internal toolkit that gives you a sense of grounding regardless of your physical environment.
Right.
And that for me is something I've been building over the last couple of years. But, in the evening, in the morning, I start with a gratitude exercise, and I try to think or ask myself, if I can only name 3 things that I'm grateful for today, what are they? And it forces you to actually dig into some things that you may have overlooked. The fact that I had a 10-minute phone call with my best friend who lives across the world. Like, we take that stuff for granted because everything is accessible at the click of a button now, but what a gift that is, that you can actually connect with someone who's in a very different time zone, different life, and, the support that you can bring to each other during that time of connection. Like small things like that. So developing a mindset of gratitude for even things that we tend to overlook over time. I mean, it's proven gratitude builds better mental health, right? So developing that practice before I go to bed, when I wake up, and more importantly, when I wake up, beyond the gratitude is like, okay, let's keep it simple. What are 3 things that I have to accomplish today? Like non-negotiable. Just set like a North Star and a vision for myself for the day. And I'll use that to guide me, to help manage my time throughout the day.
Have you ever, was it in need for accountability of any kind during your life? Or have you always were able to hold yourself accountable and achieve all the goals? Because I know that accountability is a big thing for a lot of people. Yeah.
Accountability is tough, and I think especially when it comes to personal growth, this kind of work, I think in the workplace, there's models that have been defined, like the mentorship, mentor-mentee model. Like that's a specific structure that's defined and, executed in different companies to create that sense of accountability. I think on the personal side, on the personal growth and well-being aspect of life, it's less formal, right? People have coaches, people have friends, some people use mentors for that too. But I think creating some formality around that so that there's someone holding you accountable to your goals is really important. And for me, I'm actually doing this challenge with a friend now. It's a 60-day accountability challenge to keep each other accountable to getting things done. And so at the end of every day, we send a text that says, action item for today completed, action item for tomorrow completed, or to-do list for tomorrow completed. So we don't share what we're doing exactly, but the fact that have set aside time to actually put together a to-do list for that day and telling our friend that we've done that creates a sense of accountability. And so, oftentimes now I'm like, the day's coming to an end and I think, oh crap, I haven't sent that message. Did I actually finish everything on my list? And asking myself that question gives me the opportunity to actually pause and like reflect on the day. And the same thing for the next day. It allows me to pause and plan the next day at a high level.
Nice. Who is that friend?
It's a very close friend of mine, actually, from, we were in the same camp in Burning Man, and we've, developed a sense of real appreciation for each other personally and professionally.
Nice.
And, we've seen each other evolve in such a massive way over the last couple of years that we know how important this work is to us, and it takes effort. And so being there for each other when we can to continue supporting each other's growth on that path has been something that we both value, and we've created time for it.
I wanted to shift the conversation around technology. So technology is one of the pillars that you mentioned earlier that you're like putting your work and effort around. What's any particular areas of technology that are more exciting for you? Something that in ways how we can use technology in the most impactful ways, maybe?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, like, technology penetrates every aspect of our life, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
It's been a huge part of my life, professionally and personally. I mean, I spent the last 10 years in tech as an operator, as a founder, building and launching different businesses. I really believe in the power of technology to keep it simple, to give us our time back, right? And for me, I mentioned before that one of my key metrics in life is what I call a return on my time. And so if I truly value time as my most valuable currency, how do I think of technology in a way where it gives me back that time so that I can spend it on the things that I care about? And so when you think about technology from that aspect, I look at my time at Uber. It's been like 7-8 years, but the big mission that we were after wasn't just, getting people from point A to point B. We really pressed hard on the time saving component. Like, if you didn't have to drive from Miami Beach to downtown, which sometimes can take an hour with traffic,
right,
if you could be doing something during that hour, what would it be, and how much value would you place on that time? So the idea to leverage technology to actually give people their time back is something that I'm fascinated with, and it's how I view technology as really like a true like point of change and impact for people in society.
Yeah, you could also be argued that technology takes away a lot of our time, like
Definitely
types of technologies like social media and
Yeah.
other tools that are distracting us from the present moment. And you might argue that those technologies are even more potent, and people are more distracted than ever. Even though we have all of this sophisticated technology that's supposed to be saving all of this time, but now we found other ways how to get ourselves distracted.
Yeah, it's a tool. I mean,
Yeah.
that's how I look at it. It's a tool. I mean, you look at a hammer. A hammer is a tool. You can use it to build things, or you can use it to break things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think technology is the same thing. And for me, I look at it from a lens of impact, because that's how I grew up, and that's kind of like the North Star that I set for myself like early on in my career based on my personal life and experiences that I've had. And so I tend to look at everything from that lens, and more specifically tech these days. But as I said, it's a tool, and like if left without guardrails, it can be damaging. You look at social media, I mean, and the impact it's had on people's mental health, specifically younger folks. And so it's a tool, and I think there needs to be guardrails and education around these tools so that people are aware of their impact and are able to leverage them in the most impactful way possible.
Yeah. Have you heard of this phrase, the medium is the message? So it's more related to, technology and media. Basically, the idea that let's say, whether you're using radio, just audio signals, or you're using like a fully simulated virtual reality experience, there are different mediums through which you transmit signal, right? And the medium itself forms the flavor of the message. It's not just you might actually even alter the essence of the message. I'll give you an example with social media is a medium through which we communicate, and it's optimized for attention and it's optimized for profit. The more attention they can get, the more stuff that they can sell to people.
Correct. Yeah.
Right? And so that alters the way we send messages, or like the way we communicate. By design, yes, you can stay very aware and conscious of like, I'm going into this social media world that's trying to distract me, but I have this mission to communicate something. You can certainly have that, but it's working against you in a way, right? Like it's steering you towards you just wasting all of your time on social media. So I mean, I agree with you that the technology is maybe neutral. It's like a tool, a hammer, but it's a lot more sophisticated than just a hammer. It's the entire world. It's the environment. It's not just a little. We used to have, our tech used to be just like a hammer, like a little code that does X, right? And then you decide what to do with this piece of function. Like, but now it's not just a simple function anymore. Technology is this whole experience, the whole world that's influencing the way we perceive reality and the way we make decisions.
It drives our lives. Technology is like directing us, whether we know it or we don't. And so to your point, I fully agree with you. I think this actually further highlights the importance of knowing yourself and being in the driver's seat of your life. Because when you are in the driver's seat, you can actually take conscious decisions of how you use technology and how you let it impact your life. But if you're not, if you're living life in autopilot and you're in the passenger seat of your life, technology is using you, right? And that's, there's this whole attention economy that we talk about. Like, it's stealing your time in a way you may not be aware of until it's too late. And so, how do we... It takes me back to something that's really important for me that we talked about earlier, is like, how do we spend more time investing in our own well-being, getting to know ourselves, solidifying that internal toolkit so that we can better direct our lives. Because we live in a time where we're being pulled in different directions, and technology plays a huge role in that.
Right.
But how do we sit in the driver's seat and decide where we get pulled and where we don't?
Yeah, it's keeping your center aligned and strong. And I think back to your question back to your point of slowing down, and by slowing down also means maybe disconnecting from technology and just going within and finding that center and being aware of it and knowing exactly where you're shifting off the center, where you're deviating from it. And then when you go back into the digital world, you're a lot more aware, like, oh, my center is being off, like I'm getting distracted. And
this takes me back to like the point of frequent stops to refuel. Those for me, I mean, like spending time in nature, for example. When I'm in nature, it's an amazing way for me to refuel. But when I'm in nature, I'm off of tech. I put my phone on the side, I put it on silent or do not disturb mode. And I go and I spend half the day, sometimes a full day in nature. And like that for me gives me a chance to refuel. So the more we have these refuel stations built into our lifestyle, the more we can recalibrate to that core. Because oftentimes, like even if you spend time building that core, it's easy to move away from it when you're back in this default world, where things are operating at a different pace. And so it's even more important to actually make these conscious breaks and use these points to recalibrate and make sure that you're still aligned.
As we're evolving and becoming more maybe technologically sophisticated, and our brain, spending more and more time dealing with those tech tools. Yes, I agree. Going back to nature, we're primed to do that. We're hardwired to be integrated in nature. That's how we find our center. I think over time, though, as let's say we're becoming interplanetary species, and maybe some subset of humans are born on on the spaceship or something. They're not necessarily on the Earth. They don't have the ground like that. I always wonder, like, is there other way besides being in nature that you can just find your own center, or it's probably not accessible to us just because we don't know what it's like. I don't know.
Yeah. It's a good question. I hope we don't get there as a
Yeah.
human species. But, I mean, I look at like a microcosm of that is you live in a highly dense urban area, like let's say Manhattan in New York. You don't have that much access to nature
Yeah.
on a regular or daily basis, right? So then how do you maintain that state of like inner peace and calm in those kind of environments?
Right.
There's different ways to do that. I think for me, I go back to breathwork. That's something that, despite the environment I'm in, I have that tool within me and I can implement it wherever I want. And so look into like meditation, breathwork, other mindfulness practices. Those are things that we carry with us in our internal toolkit, right? So regardless of our external environment, there are tools that we can apply anywhere.
Yeah, I guess we are nature in space, just a piece of nature that's, I mean, you can argue that everything is nature. Multiple times I've had this argument where people say, oh, something is artificial and something is more natural. And I think the idea that if it's man-made or a human was involved in like changing the shape of a natural thing, it becomes artificial, or creating a completely new shape, it becomes artificial. In my view, it's still part of nature. It's a new versions of like how nature manifests itself. And we just haven't, maybe if it's super new, the way evolution works, it basically makes a lot of permutations and versions of the it's like branches growing, and it's still not in the solid form. That's we're basically almost like making a lot of mistakes. They're not real mistakes. They're more like about exploration of all of the possibilities. And so I forgot what the I was trying to bring it back to the you're part of nature, right? So you are everything is part of nature. Don't think that, oh, if you are in the city, you're far away from nature. I think you could still find the grounding in any environment, even in space.
Yeah. I like that point. I think, it reminds me of something that's been a recurring theme for me more recently. And so the fact that we tend to overlook that we are connected to everything around us, right? Mm-hmm. We think as like, physical beings, like our boundaries are where our bodies end. But there's actually a lot of science, especially in neuroscience, that shows that the brain operates beyond the physical brain, right? Within the body and outside the body. And so being aware of that and acknowledging that and knowing that, yeah, to your point, we are nature moving around into other environments, and we take that nature with us to new environments. Like, we're able to connect with those environments in ways that we can't necessarily see, right? That we can only feel. And that's also an important sense in life. So tapping into that is not easy in a fast-paced world. But again, slowing down and taking the time to go inward and tapping into that power and feeling into something you cannot necessarily see is also important.
Yeah, and I'm hopeful that over time we'll have more opportunities and more time and more tools to look within. One way would be so as technology advances and replicates and simulates all of the physical experiences, we put less value into the physical things. So like looking at, for example, at younger generations, they don't value as much their Rolex watch that they do some kind of like a Roblox asset, like some kind of like a virtual clothing for their thing. And it's actually a good thing for the planet. That's perfect, because now we don't have to waste a lot of resources.
Right.
Yes, there are other additional issues that come with it, where kids are spending too much time, in digital spaces. They're not really connecting with their own bodies, we have to deal with that as well. But I think the more experiences we simulate of the physical, the less basically the kind of the more opportunity for us to value some ethereal, some non-physical thing, which is the sensation, the feelings, the more subtle layers of existence.
Yeah. I mean, I think I agree with you. A lot of people, especially the younger generation, value experiences over products. It's a fact. I think with millennials and Gen Z specifically. Yeah, to the point I was making earlier about return on our time, experiences provide that. It's a way to really maximize that minute or that hour you have. The deeper that experience, the more value you're going to get out of that time. And so it goes back to what you value and what you want to get out of life. And if you're in alignment with your core values, then the experiences that you chase should help continue to feed and nurture those values.
Sure. Shifting gears a little bit, could you share more about the play company that you worked on? And now you mentioned also you're starting to work on another project. Let's talk more about this project, because I think it might be a good direction to explore around community, around deep human connection, and those themes. So tell the listeners, whoever is watching, more about what it is and what problems you guys are solving or were solving.
Definitely. So with Play, I built the platform to really democratize access to self-actualization. We talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it's, unfortunately, you have to be in a place of privilege to have the time, the resources to do that kind of work that accelerates your personal growth, whether it's going on retreats, engaging in experiences, getting up to speed on content and educational material. All that stuff takes a level of effort. And so my vision for Play is to really invert that pyramid and make it a basic human right rather than a privilege, this kind of work. And so the way we're doing it now, we've developed an assessment that helps you identify your well-being needs across different areas. We built it on several psychological frameworks in mental health. And basically, through a 5 to 7 minute assessment and set of questions, we're able to identify your needs across 6 different parameters. We use those needs as inputs into our algorithm to match you with what we call personalized journeys that are, meant to meet you where you are today on your journey. And so we leverage different experiences, different content to help match you with what you need in that point in time to boost your well-being and accelerate your path to self-actualization.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of results have you so far been able to achieve?
Yeah, there are several things that we track, but high engagement, because we're actually focused on real experiences. So real opportunities in life to connect people around various well-being objectives and goals, shared goals. But more importantly, getting people engaged at that level and understanding and measuring the impact of their starting point versus their ending point. So the assessment for us is a science-backed framework that allows us to actually quantify things that we haven't previously quantified. So someone's sense of joy, someone's sense of confidence, resilience, and we're able to show with data a boost across these different metrics in just as short as 4 weeks of engaging in the content and the experiences. And so that's been a great way to actually quantify something. And I think when things are quantified, people pay more attention to it. And previously, we don't have the data, we haven't had the technology to do that. So we're getting to a place where by quantifying, you're placing more value on it, and people are actually able to track the time and value the output of that.
And what type of experiences do you facilitate, or what is it?
So we work with different partners across different communities, both in person and online. Vetted research-backed experiences, so everything across breathwork, as I mentioned earlier, meditation, some forms of yoga, but even things like creative engagements like painting, for example, or surfing, specific activities that we tend to just overlook as leisure activities. In fact, there's a lot of research that shows the impact they have on different metrics of mental health. So we map those activities through our algorithm to specific objectives and match people with them, or recommend them so that people can do them on their own time.
What vision do you have with that? Like a best case scenario, 5-10 years out, vision for this effort?
Yeah, for me, it's honestly accelerating the path to what I call a regenerative mindset. You know, I got to that point in life because I had no other choice. I reached a breaking point where I hit burnout, and it forced me to go inward and do that work. For many people in life, that's the way it happens, right? You reach a breaking point, and then you take a pause, you take a break, you change courses, and you go inward and you try to figure out, like, what is it that you want, or what makes you more fulfilled and brings more balance to your life. I want to approach this more consciously, and I want to build this into the way we build our lifestyles, and more importantly, the way our education system is designed now. So the skills that I have picked up over the last 7-8 years on this journey are skills that I believe every person should learn proactively in our education system, starting from childhood, right? I would love to see a world where kids, from when they start the formal education system in kindergarten, are taught mindfulness skills, right? Imagine where we'll be in a collective mental health state if that were the case. And I think we're getting to a point in the world where there's so much uncertainty now and instability. It's just become like the norm of how we live life and the world that exists around us, that these skills are becoming more and more important. And so the ability to actually train someone in these skills from the youngest age possible brings a lot of value to them as kids, but also as adults, to manage their nervous system and manage the world around them.
Yeah, you're right about the physical world and realities changing faster and with a faster rate. And even I feel like the wars play into that also. Destructions, terrible. We definitely should be avoiding any kind of wars or things like that. But it also could be looked as a natural process of rebirth, of regeneration, of new. It's hard to have a completely new mindset if you live in a environment that's just, let's say, when you're living in the city, or like in Europe, for example, I see, there are a lot of architecture, a lot of older structures, and I think that's maintaining the mindset of people of the old way of thinking.
Right.
And if you're starting completely from scratch, the range of possibilities are a lot wider for you. You're not restricted to the concrete walls of possibilities, basically.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think ultimately it comes down to how we look at those events, whether it's war, burnout, whatever it may be, events that shape us in some form or another. And so I think, some of the most successful societies have been able to reframe those unfortunate events into opportunities to look at the world a little differently and provide opportunities to the future generation. One example that really stands out for me is Hiroshima in Japan. And I saw a documentary about this a couple weeks ago. You learn about it in school growing up, but you forget all the details. But in the context of what's happening in the world today, you look at that time, like in the 40s, one atomic bomb took the lives of tens of thousands of people. It's insane, right? Horrible. And so if you look at where Hiroshima is today, like 60 years out, 1 or 2 generations out, they built in Hiroshima what they call a peace memorial. Most countries we know build war memorials. And so what war memorials do is they perpetuate, this feeling of victimization, and it constantly reminds people of that pain. what I love about a peace memorial is that you convert that pain into power, because it allows you to shift your perspective on the world, and it gives that future generation an opportunity to reset, not just physically, but mentally, and without the baggage and the trauma of past generations that we all subconsciously carry with us, right? So the Japanese perspective on life is something I truly value. And I just wish it was something that we had across different places in the world.
Very cool. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. That's interesting. Mention to me a little bit more about the other project, the investment fund, and what you guys are doing there.
Yeah. So more recently, I've had an opportunity to, I guess, take my work in the impact space to another level with a group of great friends that share similar core values. In addition to play, I'm shifting to also expand how I look at well-being beyond human well-being to planetary well-being. And if you think about it, it's actually the same thing, just looked at from a different lens, right? And to my point earlier about how we often overlook how connected we are to our environment, to the nature, to communities around us. That's true in our environment. Understanding and being aware of our specific behaviors and actions and how they impact the environment around us, and how in turn that impacts future generations or even the communities that we live in today. Just knowing that, as consumers, our actions go beyond just consuming whatever product we're consuming. You look at food waste specifically. And if you look at, as traditional consumers, we eat something, we throw the package in the trash, and we often don't even think about what happens after that point. Our thinking stops at the end of our consumption, right? It's a very selfish way of looking at it. When you understand the big picture, you realize that whatever you're putting in the waste is creating, if not managed properly, is creating an issue elsewhere. Right. And so if you look at the landfill situation in the US now, many landfills are actually at capacity. It's insane, right? And so it's at a tipping point. And if you look at what is in that waste in landfills, 40% of it is food waste. That's waste that can be converted to other things that can be replenished into our economy, right? Whether it's energy, compost, other byproducts. And so, again, my shift to planetary well-being with this investment fund is really taking a bigger picture at impact and well-being, and looking at how we can enable more change, more needle-moving projects and impact by focusing on bigger things like infrastructure that impacts our environment, helps us move to a more regenerative way of living.
Mm-hmm. Is that in any way related to what you were doing in consulting? The type of project, what type of projects did you work on?
I mean, consulting was like the beginning of my career. Right, worked on all sorts of projects. I did projects, it was all strategy and visioning, but we did some pretty cool projects with some foreign governments on their economic growth strategies. Some governments, we worked with the government in Eastern Europe where almost like 70% of their GDP and their economy was focused on their agriculture sector. And so their economic growth strategy as a country was heavily focused in agriculture. So we basically went through that analysis of, okay, if you can use your agriculture sector to help propel you forward over the next 10, 15 years, what are the specific competitive advantages that you have as a country? And based on these advantages, what are specific crops that you should create programs for to enable the maximum growth across this economy, and also incentivize like farmers and the population to be on this path. And so that kind of thinking worked on some agriculture growth projects, a lot of like trade, import-export projects, restructuring projects in different companies. It gave me a very broad toolkit of how the world works and how to approach problems that I may not necessarily have any experience in, but able to break down and try to get to a solution in some way or form.
And so in this fund and in this line of work, what special experiences and skills do you get to contribute? What's a unique differentiator? Why you almost like deserve this role? Or I mean, you created it for yourself, but
Yeah, I mean, I think the experiences I've had have been very broad, from my time in consulting to my time as an operator in tech to my time more recently as a founder in building ventures. One thread in common, again, like the ability to look back now in hindsight and connect the dots, is you develop this ecosystem view of the world where you see how things work. You've lived in different places, interact with different cultures,
right,
and you have a very unique perspective on problem solving. If you look at some of the biggest problems in our society today, you look at climate change and planetary well-being, it's at the forefront of that. We're getting to a point where the cost of maintaining our current actions is actually more expensive than the cost of shifting.
Right.
And so that leaves people with no choice but to do things differently. Like sustainability now and planetary well-being is no longer a choice. It's not something we can overlook. It's something that, governments top down are creating policies to penalize companies that are not abiding by these policies. And so I think that's just, for me, an acknowledgement of getting to a place in the world where more people are conscious and aware of how our actions impact our environments around us. So for me, to answer your question, like that ecosystem perspective and the ability to approach problems from that unique lens and connecting the dots. So, sometimes the solution is not just a strategy. Sometimes you have to bring in this technology player and bring in people from different mindsets and perspectives to the same table to address a common issue. Imagine bringing, a friend of mine who actually does this professionally. She brings in a facilitator who uses Legos to help executives and decision makers and companies to, develop creative skills for how to approach specific business problems that they're facing. So again, it's this multi-dimensional approach to problem solving. And we're at a point in life today where the problems that are most pressing require that kind of approach, right? You can't approach it from one lens. And I think the experience that I've had across different sectors and different domains has allowed me to approach this problem from that unique lens. And that's what excites me and makes me believe that I can have the most impact approaching it from that lens.
Yeah, I guess, would you also consider yourself a global citizen? Is that even a thing that you...
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I kind of shifted away from that term. I feel like a lot of people are global citizens these days, like with the ability and the freedom to move around. But yeah, by nature. I mean, the hardest question for me to answer is, where are you from? Right? And
where are you from? How would you answer that?
How
do you typically answer?
The way I answer is like, do you want the long answer or the short answer? Right? Short answer is like, here's where I live today.
Right.
But like, where we live physically, does that define who we are as people? Right. Or is it the communities that we're part of that are virtual? Or is it a mix of both? The answer is that it's all of it.
Right.
And so depends how deep you want to get in that question or answering that question. But for me, lately, I get comfort from knowing that home is actually something that I carry with me where I go. It's hard for me to be attached to a specific place, just from the nature of like my life and work. And I love being in different places. And so for me, home is a feeling that I try to recreate with the people around me and the communities that I'm a part of.
Right, you bring home with you. It's related to this conversation of nature, right? That you don't necessarily have to be just in the forest to feel.
Yeah,
it's kind of like that. You found your way of. I mean, you've traveled and lived and experienced culture and work in completely different places in the world, and that really helped you to develop this new. I feel like it's a very new way of being. Before, humans weren't as mobile. They were just pretty much local. They didn't travel globally like that.
Yeah.
And then now it's with technology, it allows us to be much more global. And so you're one of the like brighter representation of that, where you not only just travel for leisure, but you actually were stationary, right, for a few years in different places. What can you tell me a little bit more about how many years have you spent in different places?
Yeah, way too many, but in a good way. Before moving to Miami 5 years ago, actually Miami's 5 years here. It's been the longest I've ever lived anywhere beyond my childhood. For the 10 years prior to moving to Miami, I lived across 20 countries for work. And it was, the nature of the work that I was doing, whether in consulting or as an operator in tech. Sometimes it was just a few months in a country, like, launching the business there, making sure it's stable and then moving on to the next country.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just the nature of like traveling for work for like short business trips.
Mm-hmm.
It was like literally relocating every few months or every few years. And it's fun until it's not, and I'm super grateful for that time in my life. I learned a lot. It allowed me to develop like a true global network professionally and personally. But there's also beauty and stability and like being in one place. And that's kind of what Miami has given me the last 5 years I've been here.
Mm-hmm. So Miami is home, maybe also
It's
in the more conventional
my physical
way.
home for now. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Before we wrap up, maybe mention anything you would like to mention, how people can find you, any other project that you would like to mention, any other messages. Feel free to open kind of space to do that.
Yeah. Well, first, thank you, Kirill, for having me.
Yeah.
It's always nice to talk about this openly in a safe setting. And, hopefully my personal stories that I've shared have had an impact on people listening. And I guess like what I would say, if that's the case for you, if you're listening, I would love to connect with you, whether on a personal or professional level. I'll share my LinkedIn, my Instagram, my email with you. But always, one of the things I can't live without is human connection, the ability to like talk to new people, get to know them. It's a mystery that I'm always chasing, whether it's my Uber driver coming here or someone who's sitting next to me at dinner or whoever it is. Like, I think those are untapped opportunities for real connection. Yeah. And it's what fuels me in life, is to really talk to people, get to know them and help them on their journey however I can. So thank you.
Beautiful, man.
Yeah.
Thank you.